All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's Matt Donaghue with Mission Financial Planners. We're going to go ahead and get started today. Today, we are going to be talking about Social Security planning. I know there's been a lot of questions and a lot of commentary about Social Security planning that we're all seeing and hearing especially over the last 90 days or so. And we're going to get into that. I've got a little brain teaser for you as we get started here. In life, would you rather be early or would you rather um, pay a penalty or get a bonus, right? And those are questions that early or delayed versus penalty or bonus that can be really interesting when it comes to Social Security. I'm Matt Donaghue. I'm going to be the host today. Kenneth Hamilton was going to be with us today, but he couldn't make it. So let's go ahead and jump into it. The first thing I want to do is talk about some of the questions we've been hearing about Social Security so far this year. That first one I've heard, or I've heard a lot actually, is there's a lot of Social Security offices closing, and it's going to get harder to get help. Should I be worried? So the numbers are the headline of that is certainly concerning. However, 47 offices out of 1,230 Social Security offices have been targeted to close. That is 3.8% of the total number of Social Security offices that are out there. If you are affected by that, if the office close to you has closed or is targeted to close, keep in mind Social Security has a host of online tools that you'll be able to work with. I know for some people, especially for some seniors, that's a bit of a challenge, but that's why people like us exist. That's why, hopefully friends and family would be able to help them as well. Second question, is it true Elon Musk's team access private Social Security records? If so, should I be concerned? While they were doing some work in Social Security and they didn't have the proper oversight, there's nothing to indicate that anything has been affected in any way by some of the work they did. So what that means is benefits are still flowing. People are still able to call in, get help, things like that. So I don't think there is a cause for concern. Time will tell, of course, but at this point, there's nothing that we've seen or heard that should really raise any alarm bells for anyone. I've heard that the WEP and the GPO were repealed. Is that true? And if so, will it change my benefits? The WEP and the GPO were repealed in early January by the previous administration and the previous Congress, and that's a huge benefit for really three groups of people. One is going to be teachers in a lot of states, and two of the biggest states we work in are directly affected by this. Of course, we're based in San Antonio, Texas, but we have a lot of clients in California as well. And there's a lot of teachers in both states who are affected by the repeal, especially of the GPO. The WEP is also a benefit to you in terms of being repealed. It's not as significant as the GPO, but it absolutely is a benefit as well. So teachers are one group. The other one is civil servants, firefighters, policemen, park and rec board, water districts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those civil servants who are out there who worked at local and county and municipalities, in many cases, were also affected by the GPO and the WEP, and that's not going to affect them anymore as well. The third group that's not going to be affected by the GPO or the WEP going forward is the railroad workers. They have their own pension system, which is very similar to Social Security, but the WEP and the GPO are no longer an issue for them either. So you've got three big groups of people who are positively affected by the elimination of the WEP and the GPO. If you do want to learn more about what that really means, feel free to set up a time to talk with me. You can always go on our website, missionfinancialplanners.com, to schedule some time with me. Otherwise, feel free to call or text me at 726-727-6581. Once again, 726-727-6581. So that's the WEP and the GPO. Now, the other question, and this has come up a lot. So Social Security gave a cost of living adjustment last year, but it doesn't feel like I'm getting more money. What happened? Well, Social Security did give a 3.2% cost of living adjustment, but don't forget your Medicare, but your Part B Medicare premiums get deducted from your Social Security check every month. And Medicare does not inflate at the same rate that Social Security does. So while your Medicare payment may have gone up significantly, Social Security went up by 3.2%. That raise in your Medicare premium may have eaten up that cost of living adjustment from Social Security. So the net that's hitting your bank account is probably similar or maybe even down a little bit, right? But that's why maybe you're not feeling it this year. okay, is because the Medicare premiums continue to go up as well. And then the other big question is Social Security going bankrupt? Will it even be around when I retire? It is not going bankrupt. It will be around when you retire. The word bankruptcy gets thrown around a lot when it comes to Social Security, and I really wish it wouldn't be. Um, Basically, the way Social Security has always worked is it is a pay-as-you-go system. Benefits flow, or people pay the payroll tax, employers pay the payroll tax. It goes into the Social Security Trust Fund. And you just think about it. For the first 40 or 50 years of Social Security, more people were paying into Social Security than who were receiving benefits from Social Security. So that trust fund did this, right? Well, that trust fund has sustained the benefit payout for, since the 80s, and it's gradually doing this now, right? I started teaching Social Security classes for people about 15 years ago. And when I did at that time, they used to say that by the mid 2030s, you were talking about a 30% shortfall in benefits when the Social Security Trust Fund was empty, down to zero. Okay, what does that mean? That's bankruptcy from a Social Security standpoint. Trust fund's down to zero. Trust fund can't do anything to supplement payments going forward. Does that mean benefits go down? Sure, it means benefits go down. 15 years ago, based on the numbers, they thought it was going to go down 30%. Well, last year they thought it's only going to go down 18%. So that scope has narrowed pretty significantly, right? That shortfall has narrowed significantly. And the reason why is because a lot of Gen Xers, baby boomers, the younger people in the silent generation kept working longer. We didn't, we're not retiring. You're not retiring the way your parents did or your grandparents did, right? You're working into your 60s and 70s, especially those of you who really love what you do. On top of that, you've got the millennials, the Gen Z, and whatever's coming after them. You've got all these young people entering the system. The millennials are actually a bigger generation than the baby boomers. Gen Z is bigger than them, and the generation coming up behind them is even bigger than that generation. So you've got a lot of young people entering into the payroll system as they're working. So what happens if that trust fund gets to zero? That's what people say when they say bankrupt. It basically means that benefits might drop, but it won't go away. The other thing I'll say about that too is because that shortfall has narrowed so much on its own, it's opened up options for what Congress and whoever is president at the time when a decision gets made on that. It gives them options for things they can do because they're not trying to make up for such a significant shortfall. So from a planning standpoint, it can be quite effective. It can be, or it's going to be still an effective part of your plan, and you need to plan for it being there. Okay, so the problem a lot of people have with Social Security is they don't make good decisions on Social Security because they just don't know the system that well. So I threw a bunch of stuff in the chat as people were coming in. Download all that stuff. It's got our handout. It's got a little bit about the team. What does it mean to be a certified financial planner? It has our list of services in it as well. But the handout we send out really does a good job of just here's some of the nuts and bolts stuff about Social Security. If you want to do a customized Social Security analysis, we can do that for you as well. Just get a hold of me. Let me know. You can always reach out to me at 888-339-0093. That'll get you to the whole team. Me directly, 726-727-6581. You can call or text me at that number. So a couple key things to know about Social Security. You have a lot of claiming options. The decisions you make will affect you and your spouse throughout retirement. Your choices affect you as a couple if you're married. If not, your choices directly affect the benefits you're getting. The system is not bankrupt, as I just touched on. It is not a Ponzi scheme. I know people are throwing that word around a lot right now. And I would be happy to talk to anybody who does say that it's a Ponzi scheme. Those benefits likely help and have helped family members of all of ours. And I'll say this as well, and I mean this with all positivity possible. Your friends are not experts at Social Security. So I heard this, I saw this on YouTube, I saw that. Unfortunately, that's just, okay, let's see what the real deal is. So I know we talked about some questions earlier, but bigger questions, baby boomers, Gen Xers, is it going to be there? Yes, it's going to be there. We're going to focus more on how much can I expect to receive? When should I apply? How do I maximize my benefits? I can give you the answer to number five right now, which is no. Social Security is not enough to live on in retirement. Okay, let's talk about understanding the value of Social Security. First of all, will it be there for me? So here you can see that trust fund that I talked about. Um, in terms of some of the costs and expenditures, you can just see there's a gap there between the purple and the gold lines. That's the gap that needs to be filled. How can Congress do it? They can do it in a lot of different ways. Here's four options. One is increase the maximum earnings subject to Social Security tax. So currently, the first $176,000 that someone makes is subject to earnings or the earnings tax or the payroll tax. They could raise that number. They could raise the normal retirement age at 67 for those born 1960 or later. The last time they made that change was in the 1970s. The oldest person affected by the change, the last time they did it, was 20 years old at the time they made the change. So I'd be really surprised if they said, oh, hey, you're 50 and you're planning on age 67. Well, now it's going to be age 70. I'd be really surprised if they did something like that. Could they lower benefits? Yeah, potentially. They could change the fund, they could change the payout formula. Could they reduce cost of living adjustments? Sure, they could do that too. But remember what I said about how the shortfall has narrowed on its own just from demographic shifts. The great thing about the shortfall narrowing is that they could do a little bit of maybe these four things and some other things and fix the problem. They don't have to make a massive move one way or the other, or rip a band-aid off and be like, oh no, we're totally changing the system. They don't have to do that at all. They just need to make a couple of minor moves and it'll work. So the bottom line, baby boomers, Gen Xers, your benefits are unlikely to be affected by Social Security. So what's a better way to think about it? Well, number one, it is inflation protected income. You've bought that income because you've gone ahead and paid that premium with every paycheck. So be smart about how and when to collect. If you do live just 10 more years and your benefit that you start off with is 10,000 a month, you're going to see that you're going to get about $260,000 of benefits from the Social Security Administration. 20 more years, you're going to be just under 600,000, and in 30 years, you're going to be at about $1 million. And the thing I'll point out as well is if you look at the bottom of the screen here, it assumes a 2% cost of living annual adjustment. Now, when we do a Social Security analysis, we also do the 2% cost of living adjustment. We like to underestimate that. The 50-year average has been closer to 2.5. But when we do estimates, we like to be conservative with the estimate. So that's why you'll see 2% gets used in the presentation and when you meet with us one-on-one. Fast forward 10, 20, 30 years, you can see how that benefit grows, right? 2,000 a month turns into 2,500, 3,000, 3,600 a month. And that's just, that's Einstein's the eighth wonder of the world, compound interest, right? That's basically what we're talking about there. Hey, Ken, welcome to the party. Glad you were able to make it. I'm going to keep going for a little bit here, but Ken's going to take over on a couple of these parts. So first of all, how much can I expect to receive? Well, your benefit just depends on two things, really. How much you earned when you were working and the age at which you apply for benefits. So the way they calculate benefits, there's a lot of detail on this slide. The way they calculate benefits, the most important thing that people need to remember is that they look at your best 35 years of income. It's not your first 35. It's not your last 35. It's not the best consecutive 35 or anything weird like that. It's just they go through your entire work history and they look for your best 35 years. They apply a formula to that. You can see bullet point 3, it's the 3 bend point formula. And then that's how they determine the benefit at your full retirement age. Don't forget, you've got cost of living adjustments as well. So here's a lady. You can see an example of the formula. If you want to, when you're watching this on YouTube later tonight, right, you can go ahead and pause on this slide if you really want to go through the math. It's a little out of the scope of what we're talking about today, but here's a great example of how they actually calculate the benefit. So, Ken, why should I take it at 62? Or what are some of the things I need to be thinking about if I take it at 62?
I think, again, when coming back to the plan, it's really thinking about all your other income sources that are coming in. First and foremost, I know we'll talk about it at one point, but the earnings test is if you're still working and you're making more than $20,000, you definitely don't want to take it early because then there'll be penalties. But maybe you have a pension, maybe you have real estate. There's a number of things to be thinking about. And the biggest one is on the screen is that by claiming it early, you're guaranteeing a reduction of payout for the rest of your life, but also for your partners as well. Again,
All right. So building on that, Ken, what are some of the things people need to think about? Kind of a hint for you here.
absolutely. Yeah. First one is your health. One of the reasons why you might want to consider at least one of you, you or your partner claiming early is if you have a short life expectancy. Um, yes, by claiming at 62 means you might get a smaller lifetime, but let's be honest, if you have a short runway and your prognosis is going to pass away at 69 years old, what are we waiting till 70 for? Those dollars can absolutely be used somewhere else. The other part of it is you want to make sure that the larger benefit of the two is being preserved for a myriad of reasons, because when one of you passes away, the smaller one goes away. Three is your need of income. We talked about, I mentioned pensions, I mentioned real estate, other sources of income, but right now, with the volatility that's going on in the market, if you had a choice, would you want money coming from a guaranteed source like Social Security, or do you want to be liquidating your Apple stock to pay for your groceries? And Apple's down, what, 20% right now? So why would we use your income sources for what they're used for? I mentioned working is that if you are still working, you should strongly consider waiting for your Social Security at least until your full retirement age, which for most people right now is 67. And then five, which is probably the most important, is you might have a short runway. You might have a want or need for the dollars today, but what about your partner and each of y'all? Statistically, if uh, a married couple are both 65, there's over a 50% chance one of you will make it to at least 90. And so, what is the overall strategy? And Social Security is a big part of that overall.
Great. Um, I'm going to change this answer to no. It's not enough to live on in retirement. Okay. It's part of the plan. It is stable income that you won't outlive. It has cost of living adjustments like Ken talked about. It's got survivor benefits like Ken talked about, which are all great, but that's not enough to live on. Um, that that benefit calculation in terms of what you get, remember, a big part of it is when do you file. So if you're born 1960 or later, like a lot of people on the call, your full retirement age is 67. So what that means is if I go to 67, I get 100% of my benefit. If I wait, oops, let me back up. If I file at say 60 or 62, I mean, you get 70% of your benefit. You don't get the whole thing. And that decision to take it early, it doesn't just impact you, like Ken was saying, it also impacts your spouse. Because if you pass away first and you had the biggest benefit, you took a permanent reduction, and that also then hinders your spouse's um, um, benefits as well. What if you wait? What if you go to age 70? Well, they do give you an incentive to wait. They actually credit you an extra 8% per year. It's simple interest, not compound interest. So you go to 124 versus, 108, right? But the biggest thing I'd say about this is that decision to wait till 70 always sounds good to people until you start looking at it in the context of your overall plan. Because then we get into things like tax planning, time value of money on your investments, all these other areas that you need to consider with this. And then suddenly, maybe the cost of waiting to 70 is outweighed by some of the other issues. Maybe the tax planning, you're not going to get down to that super low Social Security tax bracket of zero or only half your benefits being taxable, but at least 15% of it is tax free at the state level, or excuse me, at the federal level. And many states don't tax Social Security. Um, but from a tax standpoint, you might be interested in waiting a little longer, but you got to balance it out between what's the cost of waiting versus the potential tax benefits. We mentioned earlier that, although it sounds scary, only, what is it, 47 offices out of 1,230 are being closed. That's about 3.8% of offices altogether. One of the things I can tell you, the only time I've gone to a Social Security office in the last 15 years was to help my mother-in-law with an issue. That was it. That was the only time I've gone to a Social Security office. The rest of the time has either been on the phone or online. And while the hold times can sometimes be a little frustrating, just remember that if you get an answer that just doesn't make sense to you, whether you're in person or on phone, or maybe the website is looking just like, oh my gosh, I don't even, I don't know what most of this stuff means, right? And I don't want to waste my time figuring it out. Call them, ask to talk to a supervisor. The supervisors are there. They will give you help. They are the ones who've been around a while, and they really have a good understanding of how the system works. Ken, you want to talk a little bit more about delays and how COLAs and the extra credits and all that kind of add together or build on each
Sure,
other?
of course. So who doesn't love an 8% raise? Well, the person that wants a 10% raise, because while the 8% is guaranteed for the delayed credits, you also get the cost of living adjustments as well. So if you look at that second column, when you start claiming early, you're getting 70% of what you're entitled to. You're locking in a 30% pay cut for the rest of your life. And then when you look at that to the far right column, what does that actually mean with cost of living adjustments? Well, that's about 2,100. For that same person that waited until 70, well, now it's 124%. So that's a 54% swing from early versus late. And so that 2,100 is now $3,700. That's what it shows on your statement. But when you factor in the cost of living adjustments you're getting as well, you're getting more than twice as much, 43.59, because of those cost of living adjustments. If you're going to get a 2 to 3% raise every year, do you want that on a larger amount or a smaller amount?
Yeah, and the long-term impact of that is significant.
Mm-hmm.
And Ken's heard me tell the story for years. The men in my family live a long time. The women in my wife's family live a long time. So if I make it to 97, which my mom's dad did, my maternal grandfather did, if I make it all the way to 97, well, what Ken was just talking about, do I want 2% on a smaller number or a bigger number for 37 years, right? Or 27 years or whatever that works out to? I want it on the bigger number every day of the week. So you can see the difference here. If I waited till 70, it's a $7,100 benefit versus a $4,000 benefit. And that's at age 95. And that's only assuming 2%, which is a historically low, which is way below what the actual historical averages or COLAs have been. So from a planning standpoint, if longevity is something either you, and I'll stress this part, or your spouse have, the person with the bigger benefit is the person that needs to be thinking about this. Because like Ken said, that smaller benefit goes away when the first spouse dies. Doesn't matter if it's one with the bigger benefit, the smaller benefit. That's when it goes away.
Matt, the number I find so jarring right here is for the 70-year-old that claims at 70, they're getting 4,300 a month. But the person that claimed at 62, they have to be over 100 years old to finally crack that number.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. And so
It's
that
wild.
person was getting 30 years of that higher benefit if they did live to 100. Wild.
Yeah. Um, some of the knee-jerk reactions we hear on this slide, I'll just share it, is I'm not going to live that long. I'll just challenge you. What if you do?
Mhm.
The prudent person, when it comes to retirement, the prudent person plans for a long retirement because that is the most conservative way you can look at retirement. It's not, I'm going to work till 70 and I'm going to die by 90. Okay. What if you had to stop working at, say, 65 and you live to 95? Well, now that's an extra 10 years into your mix. What if you made it to 100? Well, you've just added 50% onto the total time you thought you were going to be retired, right? So it doesn't take much, it adds up. But the prudent person would plan to live a long time. Ways to maximize your benefit. One is get your earnings statement and take a look at it. It gets reported every year. It takes about a couple months to get from the IRS to the Social Security Administration, but they update your earnings record every year. If you're working and you're especially over full retirement age, you can work and you can get your full Social Security check at the same time. Well, what'll happen as well is they'll recalculate your benefit every year. Because don't forget, they're every year they're looking at the best 35 years of income. So you can see a recalculation occur every single year. My dad did that. He worked from 65 to 78. He was born in 1938, so his full retirement age was 65. He had 13 years where he double dipped. 13 years of full income, full Social Security, cost of living adjustment, and a recalculated benefit every year. And it worked out great for him. It worked out great. So applying at the right time. Okay. Income, life expectancy, spouse's life expectancy. Those are the things you really got to be thinking about when you're making that decision. We're going to talk about taxes in a little more detail here. I'm going to take this slide, Ken. I'll ask you to take the next slide. That earnings test, that only applies when you're under full retirement age. Okay. So just keep in mind, if you're making more, if you're $2 over $23,400 this year, they're going to withhold $1 in benefits. Okay. Folks, the maximum Social Security benefit for someone is $4,008 at full retirement age right now this year. Okay. That's not even 62. 30% of that number is about $2,800. Okay. So if you're making $65,000, $70,000 a year, do the math. You're $50,000 over that threshold, and they're withholding $1 in benefits for every $2 you're over. They're pulling back $25,000 of benefits on you. It's not worth it. Yeah, they'll recalculate your benefit for you at 67 and all that. That's great, but that does not make up for the fact that you filed early, minimized your benefit, and then also minimized your spousal benefit and survivor benefits as well. So if you're going to keep working and you're making decent money, do not file before full retirement age. Just don't do it. All right, Ken, this is the fun stuff. This is provisional income. You want to take a swing at this?
Of course, would love to. One last nugget on Matt's part is if you think you might go back to work as well, you should reconsider claiming Social Security as well. So, yeah, taxation of Social Security. Social Security is a tax-advantaged income source. If you look to the far right, you'll see three options: 0%, 50%, or 85% of it is subject to federal taxation. So for people that are motivated and likely pensionless, there's the ability to get your income down to a certain amount, which you can see the equation on the bottom. It's your adjusted gross income, which is all the income that there is, plus half of your Social Security benefit, plus plus all of your tax exempt interest. So things like municipal bonds. If you hold municipal bonds, you're getting all those dividends tax free, and you don't pay taxes on the dividends, but they count towards the equation of provisional income, which can make your Social Security more taxable. So yeah, we had this one household that all of their income was coming from muni bonds, and they were thinking that they were going to get all of their Social Security income tax-free. That wasn't the case, because even though they weren't being taxed on it, it was a part of the equation on the provisional income, which made 85% of their Social Security taxable. Now, that's the good news, though, is only 85% of it. So guaranteed 15% is tax-free. With some planning, if you can get your provisional income between 32 and 44, half of it would be taxable. And if you can get below 32, all of it would be tax-free. Again, as you can imagine, the single brackets are a little bit tougher. And then if you are married, filing separately, they're just going to go ahead and assume that it's the full 85% that is taxable overall. But, you know, when reviewing this as a part of your plan, Social Security can be a big resource of your tax strategy and minimizing your lifetime taxes.
Thank you, Ken.
Mhm.
So ways to minimize. Okay. You'll see here what goes right back to Ken's point. Use tax advantage investments, not municipal bonds. One thing people do, and you can kind of lump bullet points 2, 3, and 4 together with this. People a lot of times go to, I gotta do Roth IRA conversions. Well, if you're someone who's been, been a really diligent saver and you're ready to retire at 60 or 61 or 62, and you got a lot of money in your 401k or your IRAs or something like that, one of the things you'll want to consider is I'm gonna live on those and I'm gonna do Roth conversions at the same time because my goal is by the time I get to say 70, I've eliminated so much of that traditional IRA money. And the reason you do that is because you're trying to avoid the required minimum distributions that'll come up in your 70s. But also, by the time you do file with Social Security, hopefully your income is down to the point where as much of this income is tax advantaged as possible. By doing that, you draw down the IRA, which lowers the potential for RMDs later on. Will you pay a little more in taxes while you're doing it? Sure. But what you're doing is you're essentially prepaying the tax by doing that. And keep in mind, if you're living off the IRA money, you might not even need to do a Roth conversion or something like that because you could just pull the money and use it for expenses, right? There's nothing that says it has to go into a Roth. So there's a lot of ways to manage this that, you could take advantage of. But I'd say the biggest thing is tax management gets more important in retirement than it probably was in your working years because you lose a lot of deductions. You're no longer saving for retirement. And on top of that, when you pass away, like Ken mentioned earlier, suddenly that surviving spouse goes from married to single as a tax status. And here's the thing, folks, your tax status or your marital status as of December 31st of the year, that is your filing status. Okay. There are some extension windows for surviving spouses, right? But eventually what happens is they're in that single tax bracket. So the RMD that was manageable when you were both alive suddenly might completely destroy that survivor's taxes when you're gone. So we need to think about that in addition to the survivor income. Ken, do you want to talk about how Medicare comes out of your check and how that
Sure.
can erode your COLAs or it feels like it erodes your COLAs?
Yeah, I mean, taxes are coming everywhere. You paid for Medicare your whole working career, and guess what? You're going to keep paying for it throughout your retirement. And your Medicare is paid for directly from your Social Security once you start it. And the thing is by claiming it earlier, it's a flat amount, assuming you're not impacted by IRMA. But we'll assume the Part B premium is the 185 is what you're paying. Well, by claiming earlier, that 185 represents a larger portion of your check. And so by delaying it represents a smaller amount. But a bit again, back to provisional income and modified adjusted gross income is the more taxable your household is, the more expensive Medicare gets. Matt, I'm assuming IRMA is the next slide.
No, we get back into
Oh,
Social Security.
okay. Gotcha. Well, so briefly, and we'll probably touch on it again, IRMA stands for the Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. That 185 is the cheapest your Medicare will ever be. But if your income starts increasing, and it might happen for a number of reasons. One, because you want it. Number two is because something like RMDs. Or three, as Matt mentioned again, if one of you were to pass away, now you're in the single brackets, and IRMA's really nasty to single folks. Your Medicare premium can go upwards to 500 to 600 a month per person. And again, how is that going to be paid for? If you claimed Social Security early at 62 and you're now paying $500 a month towards Medicare, well, that represents 30% of what you're receiving. So just be mindful of all the additional expenses that will be coming to you throughout your retirement.
All right, so just a couple key points for you. Okay. File early, your benefits low, it stays low. It doesn't just affect you, it affects your spouse as well. The cost of living adjustments, I think Ken did a great job of talking about that. are magnified by the decision to delay. They are minimized by the decision to file early. Don't forget about taxes, right? And how your benefit gets reduced to pay your Medicare premiums. One tangential question we tend to get from that is, well, what if I'm waiting until 70 and I file for Medicare? How are they going to bill me? They're going to bill you quarterly for it. Okay, so it'll turn into monthly as soon as you file and start getting your Social Security. But if you're waiting until 70, you're gonna have 5 years where you're gonna get a quarterly bill for Part B and Part D. You might just want to go onto a Medicare Advantage plan and see what kind of payment options they have as well. Um, don't let the earnings test discourage you from working. We have a lot of retirees who did really well, and they go, like, I'm thinking of one, and Ken knows who I'm thinking of, working retail because it gets her out of the house 10, 20 hours a week. And she just tells her boss at the retail place that, hey, my income has to stay under this because I don't want it to blow up, my Medicare or anything, or my Social Security or anything else. And so they know not to put her on the schedule for too many hours every week, right? But it gets her out of the house at least, right? And then of course delaying benefits can really help your spouse out as well. So, all right, we hear this a lot. My dad died at 67, so I'm going to die at 67. So why shouldn't I just file now? Okay. It comes down to the higher benefit. Remember what we've both said. That bigger benefit is the one that stays. The smaller benefit's the one that goes away. If you're the person who doesn't have a lot of longevity, yeah, it kind of sucks, right? Because you're waiting to maximize that benefit. You might not see as many years of it as you'd like, but you do get the peace of mind of knowing you've locked in the biggest benefit possible for your spouse. Um, the spousal benefit, the way it works while you're both alive, is if you start at full retirement age as a spouse, you get half of your spouse's benefit. So the example at the bottom here is pretty good. We got John and Jane. John has a $2,000 a month benefit. Jane has 800. If Jane applies at full retirement age, her benefit will be $1,000. Now, what this doesn't say is this assumes John filed at full retirement age as well. If John waited till 67, then he filed, then he's getting 2,000, and then Jane waits till she turns 67 and files as John's spouse, then she gets the 1,200. So household income now from Social Security is $3,600 a month. If John's waiting till 70, Jane has to wait for John to file before she's eligible for anything as his spouse. And if it's like me and my wife, where my wife is about 6 years younger than me, well, okay, I wait till 70 and I file. Well, she's 64 or 65 at that point. Well, guess what? She might still have to wait 2.5 years to get that 50% of my primary insurance amount. Because what you get is 50% of the 2,000. You don't get 50% of the 2,000 plus the delayed credits. Okay, so spouses, when you file, your spouse has to have filed. If you want the full 50%, you both have to file at 67. If your spouse is waiting until 70, you don't get half of the bonus. You just get half of the base benefit. So touched on that. You could take a benefit as early as 62, but it'll minimize what you're getting when you do it. So coordinating, this comes back into when we do some Social Security strategies for people, especially when we do our analysis. And Ken, feel free to interject here. It usually breaks down into 3 or 4 scenarios when we do the analysis. So one of the ones you see for like maximum lifetime income, assuming there's 20 to 30 years of longevity, is both wait till 70. I mean, just get the biggest benefit that you both possibly can, and that works, right? That works. What might work just as well, though, in the long run, is the idea where the lower earning spouse takes a benefit as soon as it's appropriate. They're not concerned at all about waiting. The higher earning spouse still waits till 70. What that does is that gets some income now, it gets more income later, and then when somebody dies, that bigger benefit's going to keep going. Couple other strategies we tend to see: both of you wait till 67, wait till full retirement age. And then a lot of it as well is, hey, just take it now, right? I'll say this though, when you do an analysis with us, what we do is Yeah, we do the analysis, and this is a good spreadsheet or a good synopsis of what it's going to look like. We do the analysis, but at the same time, you're going to hear us say 5 or 10 times in that analysis meeting that um, we can't really make a recommendation on what to do unless we know the whole picture. We got to know what the rest of the income sources are. We got to know what your investment accounts look like. We got to know what your healthcare and insurance plan is. We got to know from a tax standpoint, is there a tax strategy we need to be considering that's going to affect this? Remember what we said, wait till 70 to get the biggest tax benefit? That's the tax strategy driving the Social Security decision, right? And then, of course, from an estate planning standpoint as well, we look at all those areas when we help people make that decision. Okay, Ken, do you want to talk about single people and what this means for them, widowed or divorced? What what it works and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so if you were never married for greater than 10 years, then it's really looking at your own record. But statistically, most people that are single, maybe they are widowed or divorced, and they might be eligible to claim against their spouses or ex-spouses or late spouses record. And so that's where a lot of the options and strategies come into play. You might have heard of some claiming strategies that exist. Well, a lot of those got shut down in 2016, 2015. I don't know,
Somewhere in there.
around that point. But where it still does exist is for the survivor benefits. So you're going to get, um, as a survivor, you're eligible to get it based off of the age of which the late spouse passed away. So if they did claim at 62, then they locked in and they passed away at 63, they locked in a lower amount for you. But if they passed away at 58 and never claimed, well, then they're going to go ahead and assume that it was full retirement age. If they passed away at 69 years old and they were waiting till 70, unfortunately, the delayed credits will only count up to that 69 years old. But if they did claim early, the maximum penalty they'll do is not the full 30, is they'll reduce it down to 82.5%. So they cut the early claiming penalty in a half. So that's something to be thinking about. With that being said, is that if they claimed early and you claim early too, you're actually going to get a double haircut. And so that'll, again, reduce your benefit even further. If the survivor claims at full retirement or later, again, you'll get 100% of that benefit, but they will not assume delayed credits only if that person achieved it overall. Next slide. So when thinking about survivor benefits, if the spouse dies while both are receiving benefits, you do have the ability to switch to the higher of the two. So one partner's bringing in 3,000, the other one's bringing in 2,000 on their own record. Or, sorry, their numbers right here, 36 and 1,800. If Joe passes away, Julie is now entitled to receive the full 3,600 that Joe is getting. But let's be clear, she is losing that 1,800 a month that was coming in. So that can be pretty substantial. Now, if Joe did delay, he was getting 3,600. He delayed up to 4,400. Well, if he passes, Julie's going to get bumped up again to that 4,400, not the 36. So when thinking about each other, letting the larger benefit at least get to full retirement age or the delayed credits can have a profound impact because, again, there will be a loss of the smaller Social Security. And I don't know about you, but 20 grand a year in this scenario, that 18,000 a month, 1,800 a month, that 20,000 a year, where's it going to come from? It's got to come from somewhere. And so the delayed credits will help. So in order to qualify for the survivorship, the first thing is that the marriage had to have last for at least 9 months. So if somebody got a bad diagnosis and you rush to the courthouse to get married and they pass away, that they need to have at least survived for 9 months, unless it was death due to accident. That's the only clause that meets that standard. In order for you to file for survivor, you can actually claim as early as 60 years old or 50 if disabled. And then you cannot have remarried before that 60 or 50 due to disability. So again, you can remarry after that point and still maintain your survivorship rights, but you can't get married before, otherwise you might lose it. And then for divorced spouses, the marriage the marriage had to have at least lasted for 10 years, and that's the legal definition of marriage. So separation, that still counts as married time frame. So we had this one household where, and this was in the thick of COVID. They were 8 years married, very amicable overall divorce, but one partner's benefit was really, really measly. And during this time, the court systems were extremely slow. Quite simply, we suggested that, hey, can y'all drag y'all's feet just a little bit longer and make sure that you cross the 10-year mark? Because if so, then the spouse with the smaller benefit will be eligible for it. So it's from the date of the marriage certificate and the final date of the divorce decree, not when the divorce starts, but when it is ended. And that's the 10-year mark. And technically, you can have multiple marriages that lasted over 10 years. At that time, you get to pick the one that's going to do the best for you overall.
Which leads us right into divorce planning.
Right, Matt?
So, yeah. Um, so one thing Ken mentioned was legal definition of marriage. To flip it around, every now and then we meet a couple who's been together 25 years, and they're operating under the assumption that there's going to be some kind of survivor benefit or something like that when one of them passes away. It is the federal legal definition of marriage. Common law, common spouse, whatever your state might call it, does not apply in that situation. So you've got to make sure, you've got to ensure that you are legally married if you want to make sure those survivor benefits are going to pass on to your spouse. Okay, let's talk divorces. So you're eligible for a divorce spouse benefit if the divorce lasted at least 10 years and you're currently unmarried and your ex is at least 62. Now, if those three are in place and the divorce is more than 2 years ago, your ex doesn't even have to have filed. So that's where divorce spouses do get a little bit of a credit here, or a little bit of I'd say a leg up maybe. Another thing to keep in mind: more than one ex spouse can get benefits at a time. So I mean, extreme example, we met a lady in Omaha, Nebraska years ago. She had three ex-husbands, or yeah, three ex-husbands. She could do what Ken said, and she could basically go and look at which one is going to give me the best benefits and then file as that person's ex-spouse, because the marriages were at least 10 years. You know, the marriages were ended at least 2 years ago, and she wasn't married. Flip it around though. What if you're the spouse who has three exes and you're the higher income earner? Well, what that means is you could have three exes all filing as your divorced spouse. It doesn't affect you. You don't know. You have no idea that this is happening. You could even get remarried to spouse number four, and spouse number four would start getting a spousal benefit because you're married. And again, it doesn't affect anybody. Okay, so more than one ex can get benefits on the same worker's record. Um, doesn't affect anybody else. Nobody's going to know. The only way they're going to find out is if you tell your kids and then your kids tell your ex. I mean, essentially, that's the only way that your ex is going to find out. And if you do get remarried, then the divorce spouse benefits will stop. Keep in mind what Ken said about the survivor benefit. If you get remarried after the age of 60, you still have the survivor benefit available to you. We call that the Kelly rule. We have a great client whose name is Kelly. She's waiting to get married to 60-ish because her first husband from years ago has been a high income earner his entire adult life. So she's preserving a good survivor benefit for herself by doing that. Okay, there's a lot to this. And this is just one part of that whole income, investment, insurance, tax, and estate planning conversation. If you go back to the very beginning, the brain teaser, right? Would you rather be early or delayed or pay a penalty or get a bonus? I hate to admit it, but going back to the problem that most people have, the answer to that is it depends. And I hate to say that. And Ken could tell you, me out of all people wants to get to the bottom line as fast as possible, but it depends. You've got to look at those five categories we talked about. You also have to layer in health and life expectancy when you're making those decisions too. So, a couple key insights that you can absolutely take to the bank. One is inflation protection income. Social Security is going to be there. And folks, I know I mentioned this in the beginning. I personally do not believe there's any politician out there who is willing to actually kill Social Security. Could a couple benefits or could a couple of offices get closed? Yeah, that's already happened. Could they try to streamline operations there where everything is moved online and it's going to make it a little harder for especially older people to follow up on some questions and stuff like that? Yeah, they could, right? But it's going to keep paying out. I mean, it's not going to stop. Benefits get reduced if you file early. Couples want to maximize the big benefit if at all possible. And if you're widowed or divorced, you're the surviving spouse, I should say, or divorced, widower maybe, you might be eligible for some benefits. So, Ken, do you want to talk a little bit about why people should meet with us?
Sure, and it comes back to something that we have available. It's our list of services, and it's when we talk about a financial plan, it addresses five main areas. It's your income, your investments, your insurance, your estate plan, and your tax plan. So, quickly, how does Social Security impact each one of them? Well, obviously, it's an income source that you can't outlive. So, how are we compensating that? How are we bridging that gap with other pensions or other sources? Social Security can be a big part of that. That's income. Next one is investments. Okay, Social Security helps cover a portion of it, but not all of your income needs. Well, that's where our investments, depending on how big that gap is, Social Security will determine what our investment profile needs to look like. Some of our dollars need to generate income, and the rest of our dollars can be focused on growth. When it comes to insurance planning, we talked about how our Social Security claiming choice impacts our Medicare cost and what's the percentage of our Medicare, of our Social Security is going out the door to Medicare. Huge part of it. And again, if we're not thinking, well, actually, so to the next part, we got to be thinking about taxes as well. Social Security is a tax efficient income source. So, what are we doing to optimize that as a part of our plan? And then finally, the estate plan. For some households that truly don't need Social Security, and there's a handful, one, let's take these dollars and put them into something that really benefits G2, Generation 2, and Generation 3. But also, how's it going to impact your spouse and survivorship? When one of you passes away, what's going to be left behind? One of the other reasons why sometimes it might make sense to claim Social Security earlier than later is it preserves your assets to leave more dollars behind. If your estate plan is one of your key goals, leaving a large dollar amount. So when a lot of people think about Social Security as just dollars, but I hope we're illustrating that it impacts every part of your life. And so when you're talking with somebody, thinking about how all these decisions interconnect to all your other parts of your plan is why it depends, for better or worse. Matt, what would you like to add?
Um, Work with a certified financial planner. I threw that in the chat as well earlier. Some of the pieces I threw in there. Let me just run through them here real quick. This is the handout, one of the handouts that goes with the actual presentation we did today. Here's the other one. It's our quick reference guide. In addition to that, folks, working with a certified financial planner is something that's going to essentially make you realize that you've got an integrated plan. And that's part of the reason we do focus so much on making sure all these different areas get covered with people is because we're all certified financial planners here at Mission Financial Planners. So working with a certified financial planner is really the best way you can be confident that the person you're working with actually does have this holistic approach. And they're not just saying, do this because it's the lazy answer, the easy answer, or it's the I just don't know, but I'm going to say it because it sounds good answer. And we've certainly run into that over the years. Social Security people are good people, but they're not going to help you plan. When you call them or talk to them, they're going to tell you, here's what you're eligible for. If you call to file, they're going to say, here's your two benefits. And they're going to say, you want the bigger benefit, right? That's what they're going to assume. When your spouse dies and you're trying to figure out what to take and your benefit's a little smaller, but waiting until 67 makes sense for that survivor benefit. Hey, even at 60, that survivor benefit might still be bigger than yours. The Social Security people are just going to assume you want the bigger benefit. So when you do call, you got to make sure you tell them, I know what benefit I want, and that's why you got to work with someone like us. Um, these are some of the questions we can help you answer, but I would say the next best thing to do is to set up an appointment with me, Ken, Jason, somewhere at some, on the team, and we will follow up with you after today's workshop. But what we will do is just start off with a Social Security analysis. Now, some of you have attended workshops, have attended a different version of this workshop in the past. That's fine. That's fine. Because if you attended 3 or 4 years ago, hey, I'm a huge believer in the idea that all knowledge is perishable, right? What you learned 2 or 3 years ago in a webinar you did with us or an in-person workshop you did with us, you've probably forgotten 99.9% of that at this point. You might just remember me, right? Or Ken, right? But you might not remember at all what the content was. Doing the analysis is worth every bit of your time. The other thing I would say as well is you should also be asking if you have an advisor you're very happy with, but they haven't covered this topic with you. You should be in your next meeting asking them, why haven't you covered Social Security with me? Just ask them. And you're going to get one of three answers. You just will. And it's going to be what I said earlier. It's going to be the easy answer. It's going to be the I don't know answer, or it's going to be the really I don't care answer, right? Our job is to be holistic financial planners, and that's what we do. So if you have any questions, we will keep the lines open. We are right at the top of the hour. We took the whole hour today. We'll keep the line open for about a minute or so here. One thing I am going to do is just reiterate, going back to some of the opening questions that I had that I covered with everyone real quick. So the first one, I heard Social Security offices are closing and it's going to be hard to get help. Should I be worried? Keep in mind, 47 offices have been targeted to close. There are a total of 1,230 Social Security offices across the country. That means 3.8% of offices have been targeted to close. Second question, and I'm leaving our contact information up there, so bear with me while I look at my notes. Is it true that Elon Musk's team accessed private Social Security records, and should I be concerned? Yeah, the issue there was that some, I wouldn't say unsupervised, but records got accessed and there was no oversight in terms of what was going on. There's been no documentation showing that anybody's benefits were impacted, that anybody's claiming decision was impacted. So while it may have happened without appropriate oversight, we're seeing no impact at this point. I heard that the GPO were repealed. Is that true? Will it change my benefits? If you were a teacher, if you were a municipal worker of some kind, state employees in some cases, if you were a railroad worker, all those groups are affected by the repeal of the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. If you want to learn more about that, or you know someone who wants to learn more about that, absolutely have them give us a call. I spent an hour yesterday with a railroad pensioner going through how this was going to affect his railroad pension, not just for him, but also for his spouse. Okay, so this is something we do on a regular basis. Last couple questions. Social Security gave a COLA this year, but it doesn't feel like I'm getting money. What gives? Remember what Ken said. Your Medicare premiums get deducted from your Social Security check. And then finally, is Social Security going bankrupt? Will it even be around when I retire? The trust fund, assuming there is nothing done between now and about 2035, will that be down to zero? Yes, it will. What that actually means is benefits drop by about 18%. That's assuming nothing gets done between now and then. That does not mean benefits stop. Okay, so Social Security is going to be there. You're going to get cost of living adjustments. If you're married, you pass away, your spouse is going to get benefits as well. But some of you probably want to talk about this in detail with us. So we are going to be following up with everyone who attended. Thank you again so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. Ken, any closing thoughts before we shut the room down?
Nope, just again, knowledge is power. Action is even more power. So Thanks for being here today. Thanks for spending all this time with us, and let's chat.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.